Thank you, Charlie, and I'm so glad you recognized before two great Americans, Roy Romer and Senator Brock. These are two people I've been privileged to work with for the co-chair committee at the Center for the Study of the Presidency in Congress, and we're actually issuing a report that's going to touch on some of the very same issues, and I've learned so much from these two people. And you have a wonderful panel coming up, but forgive me a personal note. Jerry Wiest and the work he's done in Montgomery County is really heroic and inspirational. And there's a recent book called Leading for Equity by Stacy Childress. If you haven't read it, read it. And Jerry, it takes a rare bird to do for over 40 years what you have done, which is get up every morning and fight to make the world better for kids, particularly for kids for whom education may be their last and best hope. So thank you for that. Go ahead, you can give him applause. So I'm thrilled to be here today for a couple of reasons. One, CED does good work, consistently good work. I know that from the education space, as Charlie said. I've had the opportunity to talk to you before about your reports. But of the work you've done in education, I genuinely believe this is the most important, and it's enormously timely. These are going to be uncomfortable issues because the system is created according to certain principles, and there are real people who are affected by it. And so when you try to think about transitioning a system that affects the lives of literally millions and millions of people in it, teachers throughout the country and how they're compensated, that's going to create an enormous challenge. And if people like CED and the people in this room are not willing to join the conversation, then the system isn't going to change. About a decade ago, we went through a raft of light bulb jokes. My favorite light bulb joke was, how many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is only one, but the light bulb really has to want to change. And the problem with school reform is, in a lot of ways, the school system doesn't want to change. And it serves a lot of interests reasonably well, but overall, I don't believe it serves the interests of our kids. In fact, I think in America today, and I use the word advisedly, I think we have a crisis in public education. You hear a lot about the racial and ethnic achievement gaps, and it's still far too true, 55 years after Brown versus Board of Education, that your family's income, the zip code you live in, your skin color are often outcome determinative of the quality of an education. There's nobody I know who believes, 55 years after Brown, that we give every kid an equal educational opportunity in America today. And in order to change that, and the pressure to change that, is going to have to come from people in this room, because it is the future of our country. Those domestic achievement gaps are going to be massively intensified by global achievement gaps. Look at what's going on around the globe. In the recent PISA test, 15-year-olds in America finished in the mid-20s in maths and science out of 30 industrialized countries. Also, look what's happening in India and China. So you want to talk about America and competitiveness, we got to start to talk seriously about education. And it's not just about the dropout crisis. It's really about the massive amount of undereducation that's taking place in K-12 education. Half the kids who graduate from high schools in America need remediation when they go to college. Now, that's not a successful formula or a winning formula. So when you think about the dimensions of that and what it means for us as a country, it's a report like this that I hope stimulates the requisite kind of controversial discussion, because in the absence of controversy, it's not going to be easy to get the changes we need. I hope it brings that about, because I think it's absolutely essential to the future of this nation. And it's a rare kind of crisis. I've thought about this. 9/11 was a crisis. You see, it affected all of us. We're in it together. And this kind of crisis doesn't affect all of us. Our kids will get a good education. It affects some kids in some neighborhoods, and that's a different kind of a challenge. And that's why this report goes to the heart of something. You know, there's a lot of debate in education, and Jerry and others will tell you, the research in education is about this and about this and about this. We don't have a lot of great research in education, but we know two things for sure. The biggest impact on the outcome of a kid's education is the quality of his or her teachers. That's the biggest. Other things matter. Length of day, et cetera, when a kid starts, all of those things matter. Class size, all of that matters. But teacher effectiveness or teacher quality is the most important. And indeed, you all know that from your own educational experiences. As to that most important input, there's massive maldistribution in this country. The kids with the greatest needs systematically get the youngest, the least experienced, and often the least effective teachers. And if we don't change that, we don't have a formula that will win. More time in an environment in which there's not highly effective teaching is not a solution. A lower class size with a teacher who's not effective is not a solution. And so we need to tackle that basic problem. There are many things beyond the pay scale. I'll give you one, the quality of school leadership, that will affect these issues. Teachers want to work in an environment where they're respected, where they feel that their views are heard, where they don't think arbitrary or capricious decisions are being made about them and their futures. But if we don't tackle the issues that the CED has laid out, we're going to fundamentally be trying to solve this problem with our hands tied behind our backs. Because compensation systems affect and significantly affect human resource challenges, the issues of equity and distribution, the issues of incentive. To put it very easily, a good friend of mine whose kid teaches in New York City said to me, you know, she has no politics. She's been in the system 8 months and asked, Daddy, what kind of system is it where whether you work hard or you don't work hard, whether you do a good job and you don't do a good job, you get paid the same? And that's what this report is really all about. And we need to think about it in a couple of 3 different ways that I think are very important. The first one, which doesn't often get discussed, but is brought out in this report, is the way we think about the current income of teachers versus their long-term benefits, particularly pension benefits. In the real world, money is not infinite, and what you pay at the back end is money that you can't free up to pay at the front end. And aside from the issues about pensions, which I'll come to, simply the allocational decision. We learned a lot from the auto industry. And one thing we learned was that their pension commitments outran their capacity ultimately to fund them. And I think we need to think seriously about those allocational issues between what I call front end and back end. Second thing is, who gets what? And there are at least 3 or 4 big issues that are discussed in this report. The most controversial is pay for performance. And yet, in every industry, we pay people in some significant part for performance. And while there are challenges on how to evaluate and how much objective criteria and the role of testing, we can develop. Denver has developed, New York has a program, other parts of the country, we can develop meaningful pay for performance. So we incentivize teacher excellence. And that's what I want to incentivize for all of my kids and reward teachers. It can have a component of teacher evaluation. The new plan that Michelle Rhee put out here in DC called Impact actually has master teachers as part of their rating system, rating other teachers. And yes, I think we should look at objective criteria like growth in test scores. Second factor of consideration is there are different demand-supply curves. Steve talked about this. But in New York, as in most cities today, in most school districts, you pay a math teacher or science teacher the same thing you pay a phys ed teacher. And if you do that, you're going to be short effective math and science teachers. And every school district will tell you that that's the area, special ed, English language learners, highly skilled people in those areas. And so what you end up when you're short, almost always the kids with the greatest needs end up being shorted as a result. So we need rational, any university that paid its science teachers the same thing it paid its education teachers would get a maldistribution of teaching talent. It's no different in our world.